Hi, April. Thank you for taking this interview today. I'm Saarankan from Thomas Solidarity. We are openly endorsing your position in terms of the election happening on the 4th of July. And you're standing in the Croydon West constituency. Would you be able to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, fine. Thank you. Thank you for interviewing me about this, which is really important. Yes, I stand in, as you said, the Croydon West. I'm a Unison branch secretary for a Southwark Unison, but obviously this is in a personal capacity. I'm also a Black members rep on the National Executive Council for Unison as well. But as I said, really doing this interview in a personal capacity. That's where I'm standing. And I do think, yeah, it's important. I talk about what Unison campaign is on Tamil solidarity. So I will talk about that as well as the interview goes along. But I suppose I mean, if you want to talk about why I'm standing in Croydon West for the Trade Union and Socialist Coalition, as because we think, although traditionally members of the Black community maybe vote for Labour, we do not feel Labour is representing workers as a whole generally at the moment. And so the TUSC campaign we feel, is representing workers. We do feel that New Labour, unlike where Corbyn was, is not supporting workers, just even in the terms of supporting them when they're taking action. Generally, I think Keir Starmer banned the front bench for going on picket lines.
Mhm.
And there's been a mass movement over the last couple of years of workers taking action, and that tough supports have been on picket lines on that, and Labour isn't supporting that, and sort of generally, Labour is not supporting workers in many of their policies.
Yeah. So you're
So,
standing for Trade Unionists and Socialist Coalition Tusk. Would you be able to elaborate more on why people should start recognizing Tusk because it's not a very well-known party, and what the main differences is, for example, with Tusk or Labour?
yeah, so TUSC it is quite small at the moment. We began, I think, about 10 to 12 years ago, sort of campaigning for, and as it says on the tin, we're trade unionists,
Hmm.
but we're also socialists as well, not just trade unionists. And so we began about 12 years ago because we recognised that Labour wasn't supporting workers in the unions, and really are no socialists
Yep.
on that. And I suppose the difference between us, we feel quite a strong policy platform, like £15 an hour for workers, which we have encouraged Labour to take up, and even Unison, my union supports £15 an hour minimum wage on
Yep.
that. We've been campaigning on 0 hour contracts, banning 0 hour contracts and fire and rehire, on things like that. And Labour isn't campaigning on those things. We've been campaigning against council cuts, and we don't feel Labour has been campaigning on those things. And where I work in local government, cuts is the funding crisis is quite a major thing for all new workers, but also particularly in obviously local government. We've been campaigning on sort of nationalisation, making sure we nationalise the NHS, which we don't think Labour's campaigning on, or not funding the NHS, campaigning on nationalisation of mail, rail, and transport. Again, many of these are even unison policies
Yep.
that Labour is not supporting, and these are the sort of things we've been campaigning on, and we don't feel Labour is supporting workers on that. Got a cost of living crisis, which
Yep.
obviously is the main thing for workers at the moment and everywhere. And we don't feel Labour is taking any action on that whatsoever. And we've called, I mean, Unison and obviously Tusk as well, it's called for the nationalisation of the energy companies. And Labour isn't doing that at all. So
Yes.
these are sort of things we're campaigning on.
Thank you. Just to briefly touch on the cuts, because as you've stated Labour would continue the cuts, especially in terms of the community, the closing down of libraries, and many of these sites have been given to developers and with overpriced flats, which is happening all across London, not just Croydon. And Croydon is a position, the Croydon Council is a position where it can effectively become bankrupt, just as many other councils. So, in terms of your position and what you can do for your constituency, how would that look like?
Okay, so if I just talk about particularly Croydon, I know as TUSC we've been campaigning, against the cuts. I've been on quite a few lobbies against the council cuts, about petitioning against council cuts, and also the 21% council tax hike over the next few years, which is, unfortunately, people obviously can't afford that. So TUSC have been campaigning and petitioning against that, and done lots of lobbies. And as you've said, Croydon has been effectively bankrupt 3 times over the last few years, issuing Section 114 notices, which means they can only spend on statutory services, not on any other services, which means a crisis in social care, cuts in social care, libraries, and many other community sectors. And so we've been campaigning against that. And what we have been putting forward is that councillors must set a needs budgets and no cuts needs budgets, which you can do lawfully and do that. And we should be campaigning on that, using their reserves. And I do understand many councils have used many of their reserves, but we know you can only use reserves once or on that. So you do need to go out and campaign in the community and with the trade unions to force the government to give more money and fund local government, properly fund local government. And unfortunately, there hasn't been a campaign from local councillors. We've also called on Labour, called on councillors, called on Labour, which will be the incoming government probably, to immediately fund local government. And they can make a pledge right now to do that, to immediately fund local government to stop the cuts. I've raised this in the community, campaign on the streets. I've raised that within Unison as well for Labour to do that. But they haven't done that. But we do call on Starmer to make sure that they fund local government adequately, which they can do. And so that's the difference between us as TUSC and Labour, which, they have, they're not campaigning that at all. They are just continuing to carry out the cuts and not having the campaign. We don't accept that there's nothing the councillors can do. We think they can fight on this, and they should be fighting on this and campaigning with the community. They would get a lot of support if they went to the community and said, look, we need to fight this. Will you join us on the lobbies, demonstrations, taking industrial action on this? I think they'd get a lot of support, but they're just not doing anything, and they're not.
Yeah, unfortunately, they haven't taken a position on this. Absolutely no. I agree with you there. But I do want to touch upon your involvement with the Tamil community, because you're a very long-standing supporter of Tamil Solidarity, and you're very well known in terms of the Chogam conference that David Cameron attended in 2011. Would you be able to touch a little bit about that so we can understand the clarifying in terms of what you've done for the community and what you want to do for the community going forward?
Yes. So, as I said, I am part of Unison. So, Unison is campaign on the Tamil Solidarity, and Unison has affiliated to the Tamil Solidarity organisation, is campaigning and supporting that. I've attended a lot of demonstrations and campaigns, on the Tamil question, and as you said, we did have quite a major lobby of the government when David Cameron, it's gone off. David Cameron was attending that Commonwealth meeting. And so we campaigned quite a lot about that, against what he was doing on that. And so, we was leading that campaign with that. And so I do think, and I was, that was in 2011. I was going, oh my gosh, yes, that was such a long time ago. I couldn't remember that we was doing that. Yes, and I definitely was outside the lobby of that. And and so I think that was a really good campaign for us and tell them solidarity. And we've got Unison to support the campaign as well, which is really good that we could have quite a major union to support the Tamil struggle for equalities on that. And so, yeah, I think that I'm involved in that. And I think it's important that it's not just, we talk about it in words, which I think, Labour says, oh, yes, we can support the Tamil struggle, but, really taking action as well. I think that's really important, not just supporting it in words. I think that's what Labour is doing. And
Just
we've, I think, taken action on that.
Yeah, no, just to touch on David Cameron in terms of it's been an ongoing rhetoric for over a decade now, where a lot of them are saying we will seek justice, try to bring about accountability, and then there's been an ongoing for a while about in terms of referring Sri Lanka to the ICC. These rhetorics have been ongoing for a while. And David Cameron going to Sri Lanka and then endorsing the campaign over there didn't really help the issue at all. With some people might have said otherwise, but we disagree. Just to touch on those sort of issues in terms of Tamil demands as well, especially. But why do you think we shouldn't refer to Sri Lanka to the ICC, or what's your position in terms of supporting the right to self-determination, including separation? Because when we look at the Corbyn manifesto, Corbyn explicitly raised the issue of right to self-determination, but then when we look at the Keir Starmer's manifesto, it's completely removed that. It's gone a step backwards. But there are a number of Tamil candidates, especially in this election, standing for Reform Party, Conservatives, Lib Dems, Labour. Other than one candidate, Narani, which has standing is for Green Party, other candidates are simply not openly speaking about the right to self-determination, but they are speaking about referring Sri Lanka to the ICC. So what's your position in all of this?
Well, the past position is definitely, my position is for the right of self-determination. We're very clear on that in any struggles, and certainly for Tamil right to self-determination, and including separation, if that's where we want to go. So yeah, we're not just doing it in words, we do actually supporting that. And for the ICC, referring to the ICC, that's not good enough. I think Corbyn, and I think we also, I think, supported sanctions against the government, because they're still against the government, who are arming and having arms against the Tamil community, and we completely support that campaign on that. And referring to ICC, we've just seen this South Africa referring the Israeli army to ICC, but what's happened then? That's not good enough. ICC and UN, what are they doing? I mean, nothing. So referring them to ICC is nothing. We expect, the workers will take any action on that. It's not good enough just to refer them to that. So yeah, we think we would go further than that. And so that's, I think, with any sort of arming of any of these repressive states, we called for worker sanctions, but we do expect there should be sanctions on the Sri Lankan government, who are, who are arming with the army and killing Tamil people. So yeah, we do, and so we do support the right of self-determination. And TUSC, that is on our campaign and on one of our policies. Yeah, definitely on that.
That's great to hear. So in terms of, as you know, there was clear genocide that happened in May 2009. So there's a lot of accountability, justice. I mean, we're still liberating the community in a sense, and a lot of political prisoners, perpetrators, army camps all over North and East. In terms of what you can do from here, if for example, if TUSC was elected, what would that look like?
Yes, we certainly would be calling for justice and for campaigning on that. And I think, and we did have a lobby. Again, we lobbied on this issue as well. And from here, we'd be supporting the Tamil community to make sure that we campaign against the government and to bring those people to justice on that. But do we really expect the government of Tamil, the government now, to bring those people to justice? We don't think so. So we would be campaigning on that issue, that they're not going to bring them to justice. It's going to be only the workers will be able to do that. So there has been a major campaign on that, and we would support the Tamil community on that campaign. And that's why we call and support the campaign for self-determination on that. So yeah, we would support that. It's not enough. A lot of them, it's just lip service,
Absolutely.
by Cameron and Starmer on this issue. They're just, well, we'll speak to the Sri Lankan government. Why would you be speaking to the Sri Lankan government on this issue that, turned around and killed, thousands of Tamil people? So yeah, I mean, that's just, yes, that we don't agree with their position. We are more akin to Corbyn's position on this, definitely.
Also, a lot of Tamil community are happy or pleased with the progress in terms of the Canadian government, where they've recognized the genocide, have a genocide month in terms of the day, and then also economic sanctions. But in terms of your position or the UK's position of what you can do, I mean, how would that look different in terms of what the Canadian government has done, essentially?
Well, I mean, I do think we certainly would recognise the genocide on that, like the Canadian government with that. And I think we've just had, I know Tamil Solidarity just had an exhibition around this issue just quite recently on that. And we'd be, I suppose, supporting that, sort of campaigning on that and recognising the genocide with that. On that. I've got just looking at the exhibition. I wasn't able to attend the exhibition on that, but yes, we would recognise that it is genocide and supporting the Tamil community with that. And I was just looking on the exhibition about that. As I said, I wasn't able to attend it, but yes, we'll support that. Yes.
Also, in terms of asylum seekers, or I mean, immigration policy as a whole, it's going very backwards now. Predates probably the 30s, 40s, where everyone, the segregation, etc. We're probably moving towards that direction by the looks of things. And there's also Tamil asylum seekers stuck in Diego Garcia right now. So in terms of your position in terms of the immigration detention centers, asylum seekers, and a lot of Tamils that have fled the war, etc., how would that look like? What would you take in terms of actions?
Well, yes, asylum seekers, and so we can really support people's right to asylum and completely oppose the UK's policy what they have on asylum seekers and what's happening with the Rwanda deportations and things like that. So we completely support the right to asylum. And the rights to refugees. I know Tamil Solidarity have a refugee rights campaign which we support as well. And, not being locked in, opposing all those detention centres, completely opposed to all those detention centres, and your right to work and to live as a refugees in the UK. So we are completely opposed to the government's campaign. Government's program on asylum seekers. Unfortunately, Labour seems to be going down that same sort of route, not very much different from the Tories on that. Going to be turning away small boats and things like that. It's completely a wrong position. So we do support the right to asylum and the right of refugees. And we would if we was in power, TUSC was in power, we'd look completely different. That people would be able to come over and have that right to asylum, definitely, and your refugee status. And when you were here, obviously, and I think and I have been on demonstrations and campaigns against, basically these prison camps as they lock up asylum seekers, and completely opposed to that. And even here in Peckham, just the other day, there was when they tried to remove people to go to these deportation centres. There was a big campaign right here. I mean, on that, and trying to stop people being deported to Rwanda. So we support that campaign, and Unison generally supports that campaign and have been campaigning on the right to asylum and opposing the Tories' asylum and deportation policy. So we look completely different from when we were in power on that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So just to wrap things up, in terms of we've spoken about the cuts and that's right to self-determination, including separation for the Tamil speaking people. In terms of the Tamil diaspora as a whole, why should they vote for you? I mean, there's a number of Tamils working in the NHS, a number of Tamils living in the Croydon constituency as well. And you've spoken about the position that you want to take within the Tamil community. So just in terms of the final verdict of why they should
Yeah.
be.
So I think it's really important for Tamil people in the UK to vote for sort of TUSC candidates on that because, like, the global majority, Black people, Black and Asian people, unfortunately, do suffer from racism. Are really in the lowest paid jobs, the worst conditions. On that, you saw with the COVID-19 how it affected Black and Asian people on that. And so we do have to fight. And I do really think that Tamil people should be in trade unions, should be campaigning against the cunts, linking and uniting with, well, they are part of the working class, the vast majority of Tamil people in the UK, and should be joining the trade unions and part of that and being part of their campaign, against the Tories and fighting against cost of living, which including what's happening in the NHS, the underfunding of the NHS, the cuts in the NHS, the privatisation of the NHS, which really affects, as I said, Black and Asian workers who are at the bottom of the pile in a society. And any sort of privatisation means it's worse for us, and so they should be, or the Tamil, as the Tamil working class, be part of the unions fighting back and fighting for the renationalisation of the NHS. Also, as I said, on the cost of living crisis, and even just on accommodation in Croydon, nobody could afford, their own property, and the rents are sky high, and so specifically really affects young people, young working class people in Croydon. Nobody can afford their own homes or even to rent, and so we're campaigning on a freezing rent to build more council housing, not just, we don't think we agree with just social housing. We want to build more council housing on that. And then that would enable young people to afford their own homes. And I think Jeremy Corbyn was trying to build more council housing. And that's where our policy is for young people. As I said before, £15 an hour minimum wage, because to tackle the cost of living crisis, nationalisation of the energy companies, because it's we know what's happening. Who can afford the energy bills at the moment? Water, and what's happening with water? How terrible that is. Renationalisation of the water companies. So I think these sort of policies really the only way forward for young people, for working class people to fight the cost of living crisis. I've already talked about the cuts in local government. We need to fight that, and more funding to go into local government, because that does affect, all the community services, libraries, and all the things like that. Schools, more funding of schools as well. That's really important, because we have in many areas closures of schools because people can't live in those areas, and so there's a fall in school rolls because accommodation is so expensive, everything's so expensive that people are moving out of London, and so that affects the fall in school rolls. So what we really do need is more funding in the schools as well. So we do need more funding generally, for local people, but how are we going to get that? And I think that's an important thing, because as socialists, we can see it is the capitalist system, but we do need, Unison obviously has a campaign about, more taxes on the rich, etc., and getting the money from the rich to fund local services on that. We totally agree with that, but I think we do need to go further than just taxes. And that's why we talk about nationalisation of these major companies, because they're the only ones, we can get the money of them to fund local government, to fund schools on that. And I think that's the only way when we've been under austerity now for 14 years, people are fed up of the constant cuts. The really, you really can't live going forward. You're just barely existing. So people are fed up with austerity, do want a radical change of, going forward. And I think TUSC is campaigning for that radical change. We are small at the moment, but we do think we are the beginning of that. And if you see in this election, there's a lot more independent people standing,
Yep.
very more different people standing because they're fed up of the Tories, and Labour, as I said, his policies are not that much different from the Tories. So you're getting a lot more independent, more socialist, more people on the left standing. And I think we are at the beginning. We are not at the end. This is the beginning of the campaign, and we do want more people like us to be joined together to stand, against the Tories, and unfortunately to stand against what Labour is putting forward at the moment. So yeah, I think TUSC is the beginning, and I think if we start from now, supporting TUSC, going forward and supporting sort of more left-wing candidates, then we can effect a change in the society. I think when I was at a PCS, Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, Hustings, not too long ago, they were talking about what people can do, and I said, people do need to get together. We've seen thousands and hundreds of thousands demonstration against what's happening in Gaza. And so people can be effective, can campaign, can change things. And I think that's what people said. Can we actually change things? I think people getting together, building that campaign, we can actually change things and effect a radical change. So yeah. This is the
Thank you.
beginning.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, like with the Palestinian and Sri Lankan issue, so you would be calling, I mean, the British government, if TUSC was in power, would openly be calling for the Palestinian right to self-determination as well as the Tamil right to self-determination.
Of course, yes, absolutely. I mean, yes, thought that was just standard about the Palestinian right to self-determination. I think that's a major campaign, and apart from the Tories and even Labour are supporting that, definitely campaigning for immediate ceasefire, the withdrawal of the army from the occupied territories, Gaza, as well as the West Bank, and of course for Palestinian self-determination as a Palestinian state. Yes, we would be calling for that, definitely.
All right. Thank you, April. Thank you for taking the interview.